Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Family Treehouse, a podcast series brought to you by Storied, where I chat with people who have a passion for genealogy, storytelling, or both. I'm your host, Heather Honert, and I have a treat for you today. Our guest is Emily Pulham, and Emily is a professional genealogist and book designer. Her website is Organized with Emily, and her Instagram is phenomenal. Like, that's how I found Emily, was through her amazing Instagram. So if you haven't seen it, you definitely need to check it out. And I'm so glad I did. And she is such a sweetheart for chatting with me today. She has a sick kiddo and she has another one on the way. So she'll have three girls. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Heather. It's good to be here.
Yeah, excited to chat. So why don't you start, Emily, by telling us just a little bit about your background, how you got started with family history, storytelling in general.
Yeah. So I believe that my the bug, and a lot of people will call it the genealogy bug, bit me. Work talking, it was probably 11 years ago. I took a little class that showed me more about how to look up newspaper articles about relatives, and that was new to me. I had grown up with a grandmother who was very interested in genealogy. She had taken me to the Family Search Library, and I had seen microfilms from being just really young. She even had a microfilm machine in her house. Yeah,
Wow.
so she just was an avid family historian, loved to travel, loved to research her ancestors in Germany and Switzerland was kind of her where her ancestors come from. And so I kind of by osmosis got that love for genealogy, but then in terms of the storytelling, I found a newspaper article about the wife of my second great grandpa's brother. So anyway, I happened to find this newspaper article about her because she passed away of a heart problem, and she left her husband with 6 children, and it was in North Dakota. Anyway, I found this newspaper article, and I just like it took me in, and I just thought, I need to find more of these stories. And it was so cool to show my grandma because she didn't know the story and she didn't connect the dots. And so I was able to fill out a part of the tree that she hadn't filled out, which made me feel really good about myself because she was such a seasoned
Absolutely.
historian. So that story was kind of a catalyst in finding that little shred of evidence, and then kind of catapulted me more into wanting to tell more family stories and do more genealogy research.
Yeah. I love newspapers because they have those stories that you can't get in a traditional record, I feel like. They just
Mhm.
something exciting or intriguing about them, I find.
Yeah, details. I even found some fun wedding details about my great grandma's sisters, and it felt like reading a Facebook post. It's like,
Yes.
here was the dress color of the bridesmaids and the flowers, and I said, this is so much fun. Why doesn't anyone talk about this? We're just too obsessed with the dates and the times, and
Yeah.
the stories are what fill it all out.
Yeah. Well, and I especially love that. I have a couple of ancestors that I found the newspaper article about the wedding and the whole description, and I don't have a wedding photo. So it's, great to have, that snippet of info. So
That's awesome.
Emily, why do you think storytelling is such an important part of family history? It's not something, I feel like it is more so now than it has been in the past, because you kind of talked about those names and dates. So why do you think it's so important?
That is such a good question. Humans don't think, well, I shouldn't generalize to everybody, but humans really thrive on stories. We thrive on it's something our mind can hold on to in a stronger way than a name, a date, a fact, or a place. And so I think that knowing a story about somebody, it just makes it more accessible and less in the abstract. And those
Yeah,
stories aren't always very readily available. Sometimes you have to do some digging, but
yeah,
I do think that that people gravitate toward that. That's why little children love to have stories read to them at bedtime. That's why we love movies. It's just part of our DNA as humans. We just
yeah,
want to know the stories.
yeah, I agree. Do you have a particular process that you go through? And I think it's okay if you don't, but I think a lot of people always want to know, how do you go about writing a story? Is there, kind of a template you follow, or how do you do it?
Um, that is a really good question. I've heard some people who like to use the stock stories of the hero's journey or whatever. For me, the project I'm currently involved with is my grandmother's life history. She grew up in Denmark during World War II and immigrated to the States in the 1950s with her family. But she has quite a few big, big dramatic events.
Yeah.
And so for me, I like to outline and say, well, what are those big dramatic events that I want to make the reader feel like they're there?
Yeah.
And how do I get from point A to point B without this feeling like just a Wikipedia article?
Yeah.
So I don't know that I necessarily have a formula, but you have to immerse yourself and you have to get deep. And I'm lucky that the person I'm writing about, she's with us, she's alive. And so I'm able to talk back and forth with her and
Yeah.
get more clarity on that. Now, for someone who's deceased, the process would be different.
Yes.
But I think similarly that you focus on those main points where there something big changed for them and fill in the details from there with some kind of an outline. And then in terms of the actual sitting down to write, that's can be drudgery for some people. I actually kind of like that, and just deciding what kind of voice you want to use in the story. So I hope that explains it well enough. I find the moments,
Yeah.
find find the fillers, and then do the main writing.
Yeah. One thing I love about the show is when every time I talk to a guest, everybody's process is so different. And I love that for people that watch and listen, because I think that's important. Everybody does it a different way. So there's
Yeah.
no right or wrong way to do it.
Yep.
Do you, how do you, when you write the story, do you feel like you gravitate to something that's longer, shorter, or kind of in between when you write things typically?
Um, you mean that I want the end product to be
Yeah,
longer or shorter?
like the story length. Do you
Oh,
like pages and pages on your story, or do you use or is it short snippets or a combination?
that's a really good question. First of all, it depends on how much I think kind of cinematically about this, right? Because some people they think that they need the story of their life to be really long, but the
Yeah,
dramatic events in some people's lives are kind of limited to a smaller scope. And so you can treat that more like a memoir where you say,
yeah,
this is going to be a snapshot of my life, but kind of contain themes that represent the
yeah.
whole life and not do chronologically. Um, in the case of my grandmother, she already had a lot of writings, so I had to be collaborative with her on it. It wasn't just
Mhm.
me choosing my
Yeah.
own path forward. So we had a few things to work with. So this book of my grandma's is 318 pages as of today,
Wow.
but that includes photos, that
Okay.
includes maps, that includes some end matter, end notes. So the actual narrative, and it's like it's like a trade size book. It's not like
Yeah.
an 8.5 by 11 printed
Yeah.
off of my
Right.
printer computer. So it's like anyway, when I say 300 pages, it's not what you think of when you think of a regular
Right.
family history book. So
Yeah. No, that's great. I love that. And I love that collaboratively doing it with her is
yeah.
wonderful. Do you do you capture any of her, like, audio wise or video? Do you do that as part of the process?
Um, she declined to
Did
be
she?
interviewed. And so she really connects well with pen and paper. And
Mhm.
at first I was a little bit sad about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But interestingly, she wrote an overture like to go with her life history. So I do have audio of that. I had my friend who's a musician put that together in a nice way. So I do have this really beautiful arrangement of her overture that she wrote, and so I really love that. What I wish for sure is that we had some quality recordings. She's a singer, actually. So I wish I had some quality recordings of her singing in her younger years.
Yes.
But we do have some family videos tucked away in the archives. So
Yeah.
it is not quite the multimedia experience, but I still think I still feel it was a worthy endeavor. But I
Yes.
totally agree with you. It's nice. It's nice to have multimedia when you can.
Yeah. I love that brought tears to my eyes when you told me about that with the overture. That's incredible. What a great
Yeah.
piece to have from her. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
very unique.
Yeah. Emily, do you have any resources or tools that you recommend for people, especially people that are starting out with wanting to write their family stories and family history?
Um, that's a great question. Um, wow. I would say it depends on what kind of content you're starting with. If you have a lot of physical content that needs to be digitized, become best friends with your local library, become best friends with the local family search center to get digitizing. That's where I spent the bulk of my time. I have boxes and boxes from my grandma
Yeah,
to be able to get all of my materials in one place.
yeah,
So I would say utilize those resources if that's the type of work you're doing. And if not, become really familiar with the databases, I mean, Storied,
yeah,
Ancestry, all of them, and gather things into folders and just try to use the digital tools at your disposal if you don't need to go out to like a physical library. There really are more resources out there now than there ever have
yes,
been for
yeah,
writing it, and you have a lot of people at your back. I also love when people comment on my stuff or send me a DM and ask me questions.
yeah,
So I would love to be a resource for people if they have
yeah.
questions about getting started. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I will definitely link your Insta and website on the show notes with
yeah,
everything so that you
I
have
would
that. That'd
love
be
to
great.
help anyone who's thinking about getting started on
Awesome.
a story.
I loved the tip too, and not everybody is lucky enough to have a family search, center close to them, but that is like a gold mine. Like I had no idea that
Mhm.
I could go and I was at mine recently and I have some old like 35 millimeter slides and I'm like, I need some help. I don't know how to do this. And they're like, oh, just let us know when you're coming in and we can help get those scanned. So
That's
that is a great
great.
resource.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's free. You just have to
Yeah,
schedule it, or
yeah,
and so people think they have to buy their own equipment at home.
yeah,
And I'm like, no, absolutely not. Like,
yeah,
first of all, look for free resources,
yeah,
then take your next steps.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Good tip. I love the part of the show where I get to ask people, what is a favorite family story that you have that you like to share with people?
Oh, wow. Um, Maybe people will resonate with this, whether you have a living ancestor, like I happen to have a grandmother still alive, right? Maybe you're trying to reconstruct stories from the far past. I'll tell you about this funny story. I feel like I keep dropping, truth bombs on my family members and say, well, there's another shotgun wedding. There's another one. There's another one. Oh, that's interesting. And people look at me funny, and I'm not trying to ruffle any feathers. It's just this is what the data says. So I'll so piecing this together. So last year I went on a family history trip to Scarborough, England, where my great grandmother was born, and it's a beautiful town on the seaside. And I've that is my next project, is working on some stories for that family. But what I am trying to find is a fourth great grandfather's actual birth certificate or record or christening. I can't find it.
Mhm.
That's okay. I've kind of moved on from that, but I'm discovering that his wife and him, he was a master mariner, and all of the records for them are in this Scarborough area of Yorkshire. People didn't travel much,
Right.
but his wedding to his wife is in a northern town of South Shields and 50 miles to the north. And you're like, why would they get married that far away? Everything else aligns. The date they got married aligns with 5 months later their first daughter was born.
Yes.
And everything, and you're just wondering, why would they get married up there? Well, the his wife, she was a miner actually, and so I believe this is the story that I'm making up, but some people in my family might disagree with me, and I love telling. I said they must have had a heated romance there on the seaside or whatever. And he was on a ship, and he must have been stationed 50 miles to the north on the coast. And they said, you need to go, like, do you know who the father of your baby is? Okay, you need to go get married to him. And so they ship her up there, they get married, and then they create a happy life together back in
Yes.
Scarborough, and they live happily ever after, I assume.
Yes.
But that's the story, right? And
Yeah.
that is what I have cobbled together from the records, which is not a story that anyone has told me firsthand.
Yeah.
It's just what the records show. So anyway, that's kind of a fun one to tell people. I like that
Yeah.
one.
And it makes sense. I mean, it totally makes sense.
Yeah, so that one's 1815 to 1840s is kind of the time
Wow.
frame that they're living. So it's a long time ago, but it
Yeah.
feels valuable to me to reconstruct it in such a way to say this is the story that you don't
Yeah.
see if you don't look deeper.
Yeah. And don't you think too, Emily, that when you write and research for these stories, that it just gives you a connection to those people you just didn't have before?
Yeah, yeah. In fact, there when you start to realize the hardships that they went through, you
Mhm.
really you zoom out, you go to the 10,000-foot level on your own
Yeah.
life, and you say, really, I don't have it that bad.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really don't. I am so grateful for that person who persevered through the hardships they went through.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. For sure. Well, as we finish up here, Emily, do you have any last minute like tips or tricks or advice for people that want to get started writing their stories?
I say this to people. This is maybe separate from stories, but look at not just your direct ancestors, but the siblings. So
Yeah.
thinking not just vertical, but horizontal,
Yeah.
because there's a story to be told horizontally as well. I'm finding my second great grandma's sister's story is very dramatic and filled with police records and jail time and lots of things, not for her, but for her husband. And I'm realizing that that can help me round out the story of who my second great grandma is.
Yes.
And so I just think there are hidden stories everywhere. So go, if you haven't found the siblings yet, look at all, find them in every census, find them in every newspaper. They matter to their sibling. And they're contemporaries in
Yes.
terms of the records. So if you have a hard time finding children or finding parents, sometimes the siblings can be that piece of the puzzle that matters the most. And that I think is the most simple thing I can give. But
Yeah.
when you are going to turn it into a story, I would say people want to feel something.
Yeah.
They want to know that they matter. And so thinking about how that person felt in the moment and writing about those feelings is something that you kind of have to get creative about.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
when you're turning the hard cold facts into the feelings, just use your imagination a little bit with that, and people will really connect with your story a lot more when they feel that.
Yeah. I agree. And I love the advice with the siblings. I think so many people get focused on, just going straight back in a line and forget about those people. And it
Mhm.
even works, you kind of mentioned it, that if you're having even a brick wall of some kind, sometimes those collateral relatives can make a big difference. So
Absolutely.
um, well, Emily, thank you so much for your expertise and passion. It has just been such a pleasure, and I feel blessed that you spent time with me today. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Heather.
Until next time, friends, embrace the power of your family's untold tales and embark on a journey of discovery. Let the ink flow and the words dance as you weave together the threads of your ancestors' lives. Start writing your family stories today and let their voices echo through the generations to come at story.com. Have a great day, everyone. And that brings us to the end of this episode of the Family Treehouse, where we celebrate the power of storytelling and preserving our family legacies. Storied is more than just a platform for sharing stories. Dive into those historical records and newspapers, discovering the hidden gems that bring your ancestors to life. Add branches to your family tree, connecting the dots between generations. Thank you for joining us on this storytelling journey. Your stories matter, and through Storied, they have the power to resonate across time and touch the hearts of generations to come. Keep uncovering your family's history and keep the spirit of storytelling alive with Storied.